Welcome to Gracefully Greying. I'm your host, attorney Henry Gornbein. Today, I'm pleased to welcome as my guest Carl Malinga, who is running for Congress. And I'm thinking back about the fact that Carl has worn many hats. Over his years, he has been a prosecutor, Macomb County prosecutor. He's put away criminals. Then he has been a judge where he has adjudicated people. And then he has been involved in the Innocence Project. So without further ado, let me welcome Carl Malinga as our guest today on Gracefully Greying.
Really nice to be with you again. Thank you, Henry. And of course, everybody in the legal profession knows you. I mean, your years of service to the profession and to people are well documented. So it's always an honor to be with you. And I'm not just polishing your apple. I mean, you really have a great reputation, and I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thinking back, you and I started with the same firm at different. Weren't you with Gage, Brookoff, Dubin, and Sidara?
Yeah, it was Bushnell, Gage, Doctoroff, and Rison when I was there. Marty Doctoroff was my mentor who brought me in, and Noel Gage was always a handful, but George Bushnell represented kind of the best in the profession. He was a state bar president, and then I think he went on to be a national bar president also. Excuse me. I'm just kind of like trying to remember that, but yeah, no, those were some great lawyers, interesting times, and yeah, so we have that in common too.
Right. I mean, I started there. It was Lumberg and Gage, then it became Gage, Brookoff, Dubin, and Sidara, and went through many transformations over the years. Carl, why don't you tell us about your background and some of the highlights in your career to date?
Okay, well, I started off in private practice, mostly a business practice. I was with Honigman, Miller, Schwartz & Cohn for a while, and Bushnell, Gage, Doctoroff, and Rison doing courtroom work, mostly business cases. But then I got invited to join the U.S. Attorney's Office by Jim Robinson, perhaps one of the great U.S. attorneys of all time, and I really like prosecution. I used that experience to then run for office myself as a prosecutor in Macomb County, and in 1984 I was elected. And one of the things that I wanted to do, in addition to the job of the prosecutor is, I always said, threefold. First of all, to convict the guilty. Secondly, to set free the innocent. And thirdly, to protect everybody's constitutional rights in the process. And that was the main goal. However, having worked with Jim Robinson at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I had this secondary but very important goal also, to use his example to remake a prosecutor's office at the state level. Excuse me. Geez. Anyway, what he did is he diversified that office so that when you walked into the U.S. Attorney's Office in those days, you didn't know if you were talking to a man, a woman, black or white, Hispanic, non-Hispanic. You didn't know if that person was the chief of a division or just a newbie in the office. The diversity was wondrous. And so when I became prosecutor, I decided I was going to try to emulate that. And so I did. I was the first prosecutor in Macomb County history to hire African Americans as assistants. I looked at the number of women on the staff, and I increased the staffing of women assistant prosecutors from 7% when I started to 51% when I left. I also appointed an openly gay man to be the chief of the homicide division, and the police at first weren't quite comfortable with that, but in a matter of 3 or 4 months, Jerry won them over. He was one of the great trial lawyers of all time. And so I used my position in the office to help these other ancillary but very important projects for racial, social, and economic justice. I also created the first at the state level, the first county prosecutor's office environmental protection unit, because I found that both the EPA and the state DEQ weren't really enforcing the environmental laws as strongly as they should. So I had a good run as prosecutor. And then, because I guess this is only a half-hour show, I'll try to just jump ahead. I was I did become a probate court judge, and I love that. I was a circuit court judge, and I love that. And it's true, I worked with the Innocence Project at the University of Michigan to try to identify and free some people who were wrongfully convicted in the state system over the years, and loved that work as well. Basically, the goal is always to do justice. Whether you're a prosecutor or a defense attorney, you're trying to do justice, defend the Constitution, and get things right.
Now, you were also working with the Attorney General's office more recently, isn't that correct?
Yes, Dana Nessel asked me. I said I could only do it for a short time because I knew I was going to be running for Congress, and you can't both be running for Congress and heading a state agency. Anyway, she asked me to become the chair of the Elder Abuse Task Force, and it went back to my work as a probate judge. Dana was well aware of these things. I was well aware that there are some abuses. It doesn't happen all the time, so I don't want to make people fearful of the probate court. But there are abuses where fiduciaries, people appointed as guardians or people who serve as trustees or conservators who are appointed to protect vulnerable persons end up charging way too much or getting involved in some questionable deals where the protected person is not protected. And Dana Nessel wanted to lead the reform, and she did. And I was proud to be a part of a committee of over 100 people, experts in their field, to identify the abuses in the probate court system. And we did. Some legislation has been introduced. Some laws have been passed. Some are still waiting to be passed. But it was a real honor to serve with a dedicated public servant like Dana, who just has the public good in the forefront at all times to protect the vulnerable.
Carl, you're running for Congress. Why?
Yeah. Well, this is a question which my wife always asks me. I mean, one plausible path would be to say, look, I've had a good career. I've served as a prosecutor, a judge, a probate and circuit. I've done some good defense work to free innocent persons. So, but there are two reasons. First of all, the times are so toxic that I think it's necessary to get somebody who's got a lot of experience in a lot of factors in public service to bring that experience to Washington in kind of a dispassionate, rational, logical, reasonable way, so that we end politics where everybody is always shouting slogans or being so angry with one another. I want to get in there to just make sure that we pass good laws, that we allow reason and evidence to prevail. And that's number one. Number two, I was shaken to the core when Donald Trump and his allies back in January 6th of 2021 tried to disallow electoral votes, tried basically to overturn an election, shred the Constitution, and came up with this ridiculous theory that the Vice President of the United States could control what votes would be counted or not counted. There is nothing in the U.S. Constitution which would give the Vice President that power, and yet tens of thousands of people believed that he did have that power because Donald Trump told that lie. And so just going forward, I reason to myself, look, it happens to be January 6th of 2025 when the Electoral College reports again. And if the election is won by a big margin one way or the other, so be it. But if it's close, and if Donald Trump and his allies try to pull the same unconstitutional stunt of trying to disallow electoral votes, disenfranchise people, I want to be there as a member of Congress, as a lawyer, as a judge, as a prosecutor, to stand up for the Constitution and say, no, the Constitution is sacred. You are not going to hijack this election. You are not going to ignore the Constitution. We're going to do it right. And so the necessity of the times is really driving me to say one more stint at public service and yet another office, because the future of democracy is at stake.
Phrase an interesting point. Is Congress, the new Congress, sworn in before January 6th?
Yes, yes, that's something which a lot of people don't know. It's not the current representatives; it's the people elected in November that will be there to receive the electoral votes in January. The Congress gets sworn in on the 3rd. The Electoral College reports on the 5th.
That's interesting. So that's an important point. I mean, if you're elected, then you would definitely have a say in that. Though now, in this past week, we've had a complete groundswell. So who knows where things are going? I mean, we have President Biden who's dropped out, and we now have Vice President Kamala Harris, who is now going to be running, definitely.
Yeah, she has gathered enough delegates. She is going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. With her background as a prosecutor and attorney general, I am anxious to see her serve because I think we prosecutors are often the forgotten public servants in the process. It's tough being a prosecutor because you're there to do justice, which means that if you would just watch TV shows and movies, you would think that the prosecutor is just hell-bent for a conviction all the time. But that's not true. I mean, the prosecutor there is, we like to say about ourselves that we are the first defense attorney that anybody has because we review the investigations that the police bring us. We make the decision as to whether a person should be charged or freed. And so the prosecutor is a minister of justice. And it's just great to know that a minister of justice like Harris could be very well leading our country. And I'm really excited about her candidacy. I very much like Joe Biden, but I think like the rest of the country, I was just praying that he would step down because that debate was crushing. And then the sad part is that in the week following, when Mr. Biden appeared in a few interviews and talk shows, it's not like he rebounded back. I mean, it was not comforting. And going forward into the future, it was difficult to think 2 or 3 years from now how sharp he would be. So I think he made a patriotic, selfless decision. It's got to be hard when you, not only when you're president, but when you think that you are the person who is in the best position, the most likely to beat Donald Trump. If you really believe that, it's hard to step away. But the thing I liked about the president is that he listened to the polls, he listened to his advisors, he listened to reason, he put ego in the background, he did that which was best for the country at great personal sacrifice to himself. The man is now a hero in American history. He stopped Donald Trump in 2020 by getting elected, and he's stopping Donald Trump now by stepping out of the way so that somebody younger and more vigorous can come in there and debate Donald Trump. And I just can't wait because, I mean, we have a brilliant person in Kamala Harris, and we have Donald Trump on the other side. I can't wait for the debate.
It's going to be exciting. In fact, there's been a tremendous amount of energy and excitement that's already welled up in these past few days that just wasn't there before. So it's going to be interesting. I mean, politics, you never know what's going to happen, but it's never dull.
Yeah.
Carl, we have an aging population in Michigan. What do you see as some key issues that the gracefully graying, for lack of a better word, population faces?
Well, I mean, I think everybody should, first of all, realize that getting older is better than the alternative, but getting older does mean that there are limitations on our physical and mental abilities, and we can't blithely think that we are going to live forever and be sound in mind and body forever. And so as you get into your 60s, having been a probate judge, I really have seen this so many times. People do, I'm not advertising for attorneys, but this is one time when it is really necessary to see a financial advisor, to see an attorney, to sit down and make sure that your affairs are in order, both in terms of your finances, but don't assume that you're going to continue to enjoy good health into your 90s. There are heart problems which strike us all. There are mini strokes. There are more serious strokes. You can be you can be fine one day and not really in good shape the next day. And so sit down and make an estate plan as to what happens after you leave this earth. But also, think about what happens if you suffer some kind of setback. You still are thinking rationally, but you're debilitated and you need help. So get a power of attorney, get a medical power of attorney, make it easy on your loved ones, because if something happens, they're going to be in such an emotional crisis anyway. Why make it more difficult because you haven't laid out exactly the plan that you want to have to take care of yourself? And make sure that you set enough money aside for any healthcare needs that you might have. Now, that's, I suppose, easier said than done, because you can't just print money. But you have to be mature enough to sit back and say, look, if everybody else on the planet over the eons has grown old and has passed away at some point, it's going to happen to me. And so instead of hiding my head in the sand, I think I just have to embrace the reality that this is a good life, but it's a short life, and make appropriate plans.
Well stated. I mean, it's important. It's important to plan ahead. We live for today, but you don't know what tomorrow will bring. And so that's very important. One of the key issues, and really it's something that is important and really a big difference between the Democrats and Republicans, has been Obamacare, some of the things for Social Security, lowering health care costs. One of the big accomplishments under the Biden administration has been insulin caps. And so these are important. What key issues do you see facing us with regard to Social Security, as well as the cost of medical insurance and medicine, Carl?
First of all, I do have to thank Joe Biden. I have two granddaughters who are dealing with diabetes. I had a son who at age 43 passed away. It's a terrible disease. And
Yes,
if in addition to the way that it wrecks your body, if in addition to that there's an economic burden, the combined burdens are just sometimes too much. So thank the Democratic Party, thank the members of Congress, thank Joe Biden for putting the cap on insulin. But that should run to other things as well. Now, I know that the drug companies think that they should be able to make these unlimited profits, because they say, well, look, we need some for research. And I'm sure that they need some for research. But if you take a look at the imbalance, the amount that they make in terms of profits is just so vastly in excess of what they put in for research. And so I don't think that they can use that excuse all the time. So with the Democratic Party, with the president who is a Democrat, I think we will continue the effort to make sure that drug prices are held in check, that these life-saving drugs are available. I mean, it's not like a free market. I mean, you can talk about the free market if you're buying cars or boxes of Cheerios or anything else, but healthcare, your healthcare puts you in an emotional state where if you need something to stay alive, you're going to spend almost anything. And so immediately you're in a position of a victim being extorted, because there is nothing that you won't hold back for yourself, your wife, your children, your family. You are in a vulnerable stance at that point. So all we can hope for is that government works for us to be able to put a cap on these life-saving drugs and make sure that there's a way for everybody in the society to get them. In addition to that, saving Social Security is so important. I mean, yes, it started out as just a means to supplement other savings. But in terms of planning, if back 20, 30, 40 years ago, when you were making plans for your future, you knew that Social Security is going to be there. Maybe the pension that you got wasn't big enough, but you decided, I will stay in this profession because my pension and Social Security will see me through. And now, if you're in your 60s, 70s, or 80s, and somebody pulls the carpet from under that, It means your whole lifetime of planning, everything that you depended upon to make plans for your golden years, has suddenly been revoked. And it's just so vicious and so fundamentally unfair. And the Republican Party plays with it all the time. And the Democratic Party, one of the reasons I'm a Democrat is that, look, there is certainty in this issue that of all of the issues, we know this, that the Democratic Party, Democratic candidates are going to protect Social Security, that the Republicans are always looking for a way to kind of decrease the burden on business and find ways to cut or make it harder to get those the payments. It just is a sharp dividing line.
Critical. And the question I have is, there's a danger the Social Security is going to run out of money in the next 10 or 15 years. The question then, how do you save it? I mean, you have to raise Social Security taxes, or you have to do something to fund it. Perhaps you have the eligibility age raised. I don't know. I'm just
well. I mean, look, the majority of what you need to do is simply in taking the cap off of the limitations on the Social Security taxes. That if you're earning $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, you're taxed on FICA all the way up to the end of the year. If you're making $200,000, $400,000, $800,000, your taxes drop off after a few months. Just make it equal and even for everybody. That this is a percentage of your income that you're going to pay. It's to safeguard us all. It's to improve the economy, because if people who in their elder years have money and they spend it, a rising tide lifts all the boats in the harbor. It means that the economy gets better. There are a lot of advantages just to make sure that Social Security continues. The money is being taxed, yes, but the money is being spent. And so everybody's economic circumstances improve. People will complain that, well, I got to pay more taxes, but they also are making more income. And so just lift the cap that's currently there to make sure that Social Security is fully funded.
It's a simple, logical fix. So why don't we do it?
Because
what are some other issues that are important to our Michigan residents, especially among your constituents?
Well, certainly water in all of its applications. First of all, drinking water. There are a lot of older sections of Macomb County where the pipes need to be replaced. I think water is a human right. Everybody's entitled to good, clean drinking water, and we have to make sure that those pipes are replaced. Also, in terms of our ability to enjoy the summer, go to the beach. When I was a kid, I lived in the south end of Warren, poor section of town. I didn't know I was poor because, my family had picnics. We went to the beach with my cousins, and I enjoyed life. But nowadays, if you go to Metro Beach or St. Clair Shores, you got to worry about the E. coli warnings, because the combined sewer and drainage systems that we've built over the years are undersized, meaning that in heavy rain events, the sewage that is supposed to be fully treated before it's released is only partially treated. And so we have, not a lot, but just the thought of it is sickening. We have partially treated sewage going into the lakes. And now, because of the ravages of climate change and the heavier rain events, the overflows happen more often. And sometimes it's not just partially treated sewage, it's untreated sewage that goes into the lake. Now, nature takes care of a lot of it with the sunshine. I mean, there's a lot of antiseptic value that sunshine has, but it can't take the overload that we're currently dumping into it. And so for the sake of clean water, both for recreation and as well as for drinking, we need to start building out our sewer systems differently. We have to separate them. We have to have drainage be separately drained into the lake from sewage. We have to have basins which can contain all of the sewage, fully treat it, get out the solids, and empty it out so that when it is emptied into our streams, it is as pure as drinking water. It can be done. Now, because I know the science, because I dealt with this for a long time, I personally would have no problem drinking water straight from one of those treatment plants if done right. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, I can't even think about that. But my point is, we have to build these plants. It would be a great public works project. It would employ tens of thousands of people, and it would clean up our water, both for drinking and so that when you go to the beach and your feet are on that sand, you just don't wonder what else is under your feet.
Carl, are there any other issues that are being raised by your constituents that we should be cognizant of?
Well, I think that the main one is people want personal freedom. Men or women don't want the government interfering in our personal healthcare choices, but where this comes to a point in our society nowadays is with women, and the ability of women to just make their own healthcare choices without fear of the government interfering. I mean, I was a prosecutor, I was a judge. I know that if the law said that somehow a woman seeking an abortion had to have approval of a judge, I would not. No, this is not what I signed up for. Healthcare choices are between a woman and her physician. You should not be involving police officers or prosecutors or judges. We don't have anything to say about that. These are private decisions. And yet, crazily, the Republican Party, for reasons that I just frankly don't understand, just think that it is their right to make laws, rules, and regulations governing a woman's healthcare choices and the right to an abortion. I mean, when you get into, I'll leave it at that. It's so frustrating to think that this is even still an issue out there. Personal freedom, personal choice about your own healthcare decisions, man or woman. But as a woman, that means knowing that you can do your family planning. You can have an abortion if it's medically indicated. If the necessities of your life indicated, it's your body, it's your business. Well, there are two signs. When I marched in some pro-choice rallies a couple of years ago when we were passing the Reproductive Rights Amendment in Michigan, I think it sums it up. The first one says that the most difficult decision a woman might ever have to face is not yours. And the other one is, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. I think that sums it up. It's a private matter, should be outside of the concern of government.
Well stated, Carl. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, I said I really appreciate shows like this because the current news cycle is always so short in terms of content. I think the more podcasts we have, the more that we explore real issues, the better populace we will have, because we'll have a better educated populace to make these tough decisions instead of just listening to toxic messages going back and forth all day on the news.
Carl, I want to wish you the best in your run for Congress.
Thank you.
We're out of time. I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Greying. I want to thank our sponsors. And again, it's always a pleasure hosting Gracefully Greying. Thank you so much.